Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video we're going to get our player to start shooting. So let's dive right in. We're going to be creating a bullet for our player to shoot first. So just like we did with our player, how we have a top level game object and then all the art is a child, let's create another empty game object. This one we'll call, let's call it player bullet. And make sure we reset those transforms before we do anything else to that. And then in our art folder, there is a bullet here. And let's drag that as a child of that bullet. Again, just like the player, this top level object will have a rigid body and a collider and a script. So on my player bullet, let's start with a rigid body 2D, make that gravity scale to be 0. Let's give it this can be a capsule collider. And yeah, normally if I were to put this on the sprite, Unity will try to fit that around that art. But because on this object, there's not a sprite, it just gives us kind of the standard default capsule here. So I do need to come in here, switch that direction to horizontal because our bullet is facing to the right. Make that horizontal. Bring my Y down a little bit, in the neighborhood of like 0.15, 0.16, somewhere in there. And it's a little big, but it's not that big a deal. I'm going to keep X at 0.5. And then I need a bullet script. You can either add it with just the component and add it there, or you can right click in your scripts folder, create, and use that mono behavior script. I'm going to do it that way. And let's just call this bullet script. And then I will go, once that compiles, I will add it to my player bullet here. Before we get into that script, I do want to have some sound on this. When we shoot, we want to give the player some feedback that, hey, you're shooting. We can do that with a sound. So down here in the sounds folder, there are 4 different shooting sounds to choose from. Play around with them, see which ones you like, and just throw one on here. I like either 2 or 3, mostly for the player. I'll throw that on there. Oh, also, by the way, the capsule collider, the collider needs to be a trigger, so let's check that. And now we can open up our bullet script. Similar to other projectiles we've made, we're going to set up a float for our speed. I'm going to set this equal to like 30 or so. That's a lot faster than kind of what I've done before. But again, bigger project. It needs to cover more ground and it has to go faster. Also, we don't want our player to be able to outrun our bullets. That's a little embarrassing when that happens. So then we also need that rigid body 2D. Let's call that RB. Did that in the wrong order. And then just in start, we will assign that component reference, that rigid body 2D, and then we're going to use our rigid body to add a force, so rb.addForce. And this time, because we're going to be able to shoot in any direction, we don't want to give this a absolute value of like a vector2.up or down or any direction like that. Those are absolute values. So up is always going to go up, left will always go left. We can use a relative direction, and we do that by going with our transform. You can say transform.right. So it will always travel to the right transform. And what this does is it actually says the vector3 transform.right is the red axis of the transform in world space. We'll come back to that in a second because we're going to use transform.right a lot in this video. We'll multiply that by our speed, and then because we want to add this all at the same time, we will use this force mode 2d.impulse. So this is the force we're adding, and then that impulse force mode allows it to happen all at once. It shoots off like a grenade. It's a big blast of force. And I don't even need my update, so I'm going to clean up my script a little bit, get rid of that, and we'll save that. So I can go and just kind of check this out now. When I hit play, my bullet should shoot off to the right and make a sound because play on awake is on that audio source. There we go. The last thing I want to do is to make a prefab out of this. I don't have a prefabs folder yet, so let's create that folder, prefabs. I'll make sure that's in the root assets. And then I can drag my player bullet down into prefabs. And I'll clear that one out of the scene. And now, because I'm doing this with the keyboard and mouse, we're going to shoot wherever the mouse is on the screen. And so we need something to follow the position of the mouse. I want to give the player feedback on which direction they're aiming. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up like a turret game object as a child of our player. And then on that turret, we'll put the fire position where we will actually create the bullets when we shoot. So on my player, I'm going to right click, create an empty game object, call this my turret. Again, I'm double checking that this is all reset. So that is, if I'm on my pivot view here instead of center, if I'm on pivot, that pivot, like with the move tool, should be in the center. And then as a child of that turret, down here in art, there's this aim sprite, and I'm just going to drag that as a child, and that'll make a child game object, and I'll put that sprite renderer on there. Now it is popping up in the center here. I want to pull that out to the right some, usually about half a unit or so, so 0.5 on that X. And so what's going to happen is when I have my turret here, we're going to rotate along the Z. So if I'm just manually doing this right now, if I turn this Z, it's going to spin around and see how that aim arrow rotates around the player. So that's how I know that this is going to work the way I want it to. So that aim is inheriting the transformations from that turret. So the turret center is in the middle of the player, but because the position is offset, it'll go ahead and spin around on that circle. So let me put that back to 0. And then on this turret, this is the game object that's going to hold the code for our shooting. And so again, in my scripts, I need to create a mono behavior script. And let's call this like player shooting, player firing, something to that effect. So just so you understand what it is. And we'll open that up as well. And once again, similar to other tutorials that I've made, we're going to have a public game object for the player bullet, what we're going to shoot, the object we will be creating. And then we need another game object for where we're going to shoot that, so the fire position. Let's go ahead and continue making some variables here. We want to have a public float for our fire rate. I'm going to set that equal to 10. And just as a note, this is going to be the number of projectiles that we create per second. And I neglected to put my semicolon there. Let's put that in there. And then to go along with that, we'll have a private float for our fire countdown. And we'll set that later in our code. The last thing I need here is I want to make a public vector3. I'm gonna call this my target. And I don't need my start method here, so we can get rid of that. Then an update. We're going to set what the target is, and I'm going to walk you through how this works. So we'll set target equal to, we're going to go off the camera.main. So from the main camera, we'll use a screen to world point. And that screen point that we're going to convert into a world point is going to be the mouse position. So we're going to do input.mouse position. And then again, similar to that bullet, we're going to say our transform.right equals the target minus where we currently are. So transform.position. And let's go check this out, see what happens. Save that. So this is another way of kind of rotating our objects. So we can we can have Unity tell these game objects, hey, you're pointing right is point at this direction, and that'll rotate it for us. We have to subtract our current position from the target so that it basically creates that vector correctly. So now when I go to play this, and I put my mouse down here, oh, you know what? It would be super helpful if I actually assigned that script there. So I don't need the bullet or the fire position yet because we're still working. So the player shooting goes on the turret. And now when I move my mouse around, well, that aim is certainly pointing at my mouse, but it's doing some weird stuff. See, it's not staying on that plane. And if you look over at this target value, which is why we made it public, my Z is set to -10. And if I switch from 2D mode, we can see that it's actually pointing kind of off and above the player here. Now, what else in our scene has a Z value of -10? Well, if I put my mouse right at the top, that arrow up there points to my camera. My main camera has a Z value of -10. So that screen to world point, the screen is the camera, so it's pointing over there. So we need to find a way to hopefully quickly and easily get that Z value back down to 0 where the rest of the game is happening down here. And it is actually pretty easy. So before we assign the turret to look at the target, after we get the mouse position, we'll just set the target's Z value to be 0. Now I can say that if I go back and test again, now it behaves like I want it to. It just goes around a circle on the player. And so let me switch back to 2D view. I'm going to not make this public, just have a vector 3 of target there. And just so it doesn't clutter up my inspector any more than I have to. So now let's get our player shooting. So again, still an update. I'm going to set up an if statement with 2 conditions. First is we're using the mouse right now to aim, so let's use the mouse to fire as well. So we'll say if our input dot get mouse button, the button we're going to get is 0 because that is the left mouse button. Like 0 is left, 1 is right mouse button, and 3 might be your middle click. But anyway, so we want to click our mouse, and we want our fire countdown to be less than or equal to 0. Then, hopefully looking familiar, we can instantiate our player bullet at the fire position dot transform dot position. And then the rotation is going to be whatever the rotation of the turret is. And so this player shooting is on the turret, so we can just say transform dot rotation. Then after we shoot, we will set our fire countdown equal to 1 divided by our fire rate. Then outside of that if statement, but still inside of update, we need to subtract from our fire countdown. So the fire countdown minus equals our time dot delta time. We're always taking away from fire countdown because that's just loose in update. When we press our mouse button, we're also going to check that fire countdown is less than 0. And then we'll make a bullet at that fire position wherever we're rotated. And then we'll set that fire countdown equal to 1 minus fire rate. So again, let's go. Let's save and head back to Unity. We need to assign those other variables now, the fire position and the player bullet. So the bullet is going to come from prefabs. The position is that aim game object. And now, let me turn my volume a little bit down. Because now we're going to be shooting 10 bullets per second, and it's going to go. And so, whichever direction I'm pointing, those bullets point in that direction, and they head off in that direction. Now, they are persisting in the scene, and that's a problem for a little bit later. But yeah, that's it. We've got our player shooting. In the next video, we'll start to create our first enemy, and we'll start to have more of a game. So, see you then.